What's up everyone, Jordan here with our review of Synergia for the Nintendo Switch. This review was written by our resident visual novel expert, Miguel Marin. These are his thoughts, not mine. I'm just sticking this video together. Let's find out what he thinks of this Cyberpunk visual novel. Cyberpunk might be one of the most interesting narrative settings to explore out there. It's almost like a playground that gives plenty of room for political discussion while at the same time presenting a fun and stylish what-if scenario for, what our world might be like in the future. Or, well, probably next year at this rate. Lately, the word cyberpunk hasn't had the greatest reputation inside the video game sphere, but call it good timing or bad timing, our current game in question, Synergia, wants to find its place within this subgenre. Synergia tells the story of Scylla, a negotiator that deals with androids who have gone haywire. Think Blade Runner and you'll understand. She is, however, not the easiest to deal with and often gets confrontational with her co-workers. This trait also extends to how she treats her closest ones. She has at home a companion android called Elaine, with whom she often feels frustrated by the way she displays humanity, despite her synthetic nature. That is until one day where she comes back home to find her broken down. With no means to repair her by herself, she visits an old friend who hooks her up with a strangely human-looking android. Her name is Mara. The story then evolves into a tale of mystery and corporate secrecy while little by little unveiling the origin of this peculiar android. The main focus throughout the game's plot is obviously the relationship between Scylla and Mara. I think it's developed quite well, and the way Scylla slowly opens herself up to Mara is done in a satisfying manner. That being said, the side characters were for the most part forgettable. Some would appear for literally just a single scene and then would be never seen again. Considering this game's short length, I think a smaller but better developed cast would have improved the player's attachment to these characters. Something that I feel is worth praising is that for the first few hours, there's basically zero filler. Those initial 2/3 of the story are nicely paced with close to no downtime. Every scene worked either as character development or world building. However, things aren't as smooth during the final act. As I previously mentioned, this game isn't the longest visual novel out there, which personally, I've got nothing against shorter titles, but unfortunately for this game, this led to a rushed final act. It almost felt like the game itself was aware it was running out of time and decided to dump all the exposition it had forgotten until that moment there. And once it was done with, it all ended just like that. I think the story tried to bite more than it could chew, and as a result, the ending suffered. The other issue this part had is that Mara, the android girl, basically disappears from the plot. And I don't mean that as some sort of spoiler, but rather narratively speaking, she is almost nowhere to be seen during the final hours, which is a shame because up until that point, the relationship between the two main characters was by far the strongest point of the game. Final act aside, I think I would still consider this an enjoyable story. It probably needed a longer runtime to properly stretch its narrative legs, but those first hours were strong enough to make me care to see its ending. In terms of the sound, the music is about what you'd expect from a Cyberpunk game. It's certainly fitting, and individually there are some pretty good tracks here and there. I say individually because as a whole, the track lacked in variety, and I couldn't shake the feeling they blended together just a little bit. But even still, I think it was an appropriate OST. There's no voice acting, but this has never been something I would consider a deal breaker. In terms of visuals and gameplay, well, decided to put them together because things get interesting here. Getting the positives out of the way, stylistically speaking, I think this game looks great. The game goes for a very distinct and striking color palette, and it really works at selling the atmosphere of this world. But that's about it, because if I'm being honest, this game is currently a mess. Let's start with the UI. The first thing that becomes problematic is the size of the text. You better get your magnifying glasses ready because it is ridiculously small. This might not have been an issue for the PC release, but I think it's safe to assume that most people who play visual novels on the Switch do it while in portable mode. And to put it bluntly, reading this is straight up unpleasant. This isn't just me talking, I have science on my side. And by science I mean I took a ruler out and measured the size of the font on the screen. On average, most visual novels that I tested, in quotation marks, had a 2 to 3 millimeter high size font, whereas Synergia sits at 1 to 2 millimeters. Note that I measured them with a regular Switch, and I can't begin to imagine how tiny it might look on a Switch Lite. And this issue just gets amplified by the text boxes themselves. This game has the nasty habit of including way way too much text on them, sometimes up to 5 lines of text. Generally speaking, in visual novels, it's best to separate long paragraphs into different text boxes to make the reading experience flow better. After all, it's important to keep in mind that you have your players staring at a screen, not a book, so unless you can somehow adjust your game to that reality, it can get physically straining on the eye. To make matters worse, these excessively long text boxes also affected the backlog, because that too is completely broken. Whenever a text box included way too much text, that block of text would appear incomplete on the backlog, rendering that feature completely useless. You'd get maybe like half of the text and then it would just cut off. But there's more. I decided to check the Spanish translation out of curiosity, which I know this might seem completely irrelevant to most of you, but over there not only was the text on the backlog cut off, but even on the regular text boxes, they had incomplete lines. In all of my experience with visual novels, I have never ever seen something the likes of this. Honestly, it is quite shocking. The next thing that bothered me was how unclear it was to see like who was talking. Whenever there was dialogue, the game would display 2 portraits at the side of the text boxes for each, but those portraits never get highlighted, nor did they change the expression to show, who the one is saying the line. It only gives you the name above the text box. There were times I would swear the name was incorrectly displayed, but even if that wasn't the case, the fact alone that it made me doubt should be telling enough. To add to this, apparently the PC version, the portraits do get highlighted, but not here though. Here, this feature is bugged. But we're not done yet. I'm sure some of you will be pleased to know that this game features touch controls, which is great. But what if I told you that the regular button inputs are broken as a result? In this game, you advance the text by pressing Y. As to why that is, you use A to select from those icons you see just above the text box in the middle. Over there, you can choose to set the text to auto mode or skip previously read mode. Or so it would be if those buttons actually worked. As it stands, unless the game gets patched, they only work with touch controls. Oddly enough, the other 3 on-screen buttons work just fine, so I have no idea what's going on here. Also, remember that unique art style that I mentioned earlier? Well, for some reason, even while playing docked, it looks completely compressed and low resolution. When I was playing handheld, I thought I was imagining things, since everything looked kind of blurry. But after docking my Switch, I compared it to other visual novels I had installed to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving me, and unfortunately, they were not deceiving me. Having spoken to the publishers, a patch is on the way to fix this resolution issue, and maybe out by the time this is in the public's hands. Here is a before, and here is an after. So yes, it will look a lot better after the patch. I can honestly forgive a lot of visual novels when they come from smaller indie teams, but the lack of polish in the displays here is, I just don't think this is acceptable. In terms of value, Synergia is priced at £13.49, €14.99, and also the same in US dollars, with a 20% off launch discount on the eShop. This game takes around 5 hours to complete. Add 1 more if you want to see everything. This should go without saying, but don't pay that much for this. Maybe if it gets patched, or if you are desperate for a Cyberpunk visual novel, then maybe. But while things like the resolution and the button inputs can and should be easily fixed by a patch, the bigger issues like the backlog, font size, and the amount of text per text box would require a considerable rework, which I'm not sure this game will ever get. I guess this should be a reminder as to why visual novels are generally quite expensive. Now, there's no Switch physical version announced yet, but this is published by East Asia Soft, so 99% sure it will be getting a physical release via them and Play Asia. But the Kickstarter backers opted to delay any physical until the free DLC update is done, as they wanted that on the cartridge to have like a more complete edition. So for quite a while, I would say this is going to be digital only. Hopefully, the time between now and then will allow the future physical to have fixed most of the issues completely, but we'll have to see about that. Overall, if I was to review Synergia just going by its story, I would say it's a decent little title. If there were no technical issues, this would get a 6 out of 10. It starts off strong with some nice world building and atmosphere, as well as interesting characters that are properly developed. It stumbles on its final act with constant exposition dumps and a slightly rushed conclusion, but as a product, this is the least of its problems. In its current state, Synergia just is not a pleasant experience. Text size, resolution issues, broken backlog, button inputs, it just has too many issues. It's highly unpolished. A 4.5 out of 10. And just to restate, the resolution should be fixed in the next week or so. But as Marion told me, Jordan here by the way, that was the least pressing of the issues he had. Alright, many thanks to Marion for this review. Be sure to check out some of his other reviews, Alcana and Root Double. Plus, thanks to our executive producers, Punky Doostar, Elissa, Gannicus, God of Resin, Boombox, Alolan Jojo, Jonathan Rumor, Dane Wilkinson, J. Cross 7776, Santa Tartaruga, Alexander Cato, Brent McLean, and all the others who have joined our memberships. Thank you for your support. Please check out some of our other content, like our physical Switch games on Monday and digital bargains on Sunday. We'll see you guys over there. Take care.